So, look, the president has been blaming everything, obviously,
Right.
except himself
This
and
worries
the
me.
Democrats for the inflation, everything.
Yeah.
But he does have at least one point on his side, which is it is a worldwide phenomenon. And if you just take a look at this last chart, a chart that the White House presumably will make some use of, you can see, yes, we do have the highest inflation among major countries in the world. But you can see there's a bunch of others not far behind us. It is a fact that it is a worldwide phenomenon, although in our case, there's a fair amount of self-inflicted pain that we've put on ourselves with too much stimulus, too big budget deficits, too much bond buying by the Federal Reserve, too much money printing by the Federal Reserve. And that's what's coming home to roost. And look, it's the number one issue, and it's going to be a really tough one for the Democrats.
Interesting comments there from a former Obama staffer, Steve Rattner, telling MSNBC that the president will blame everything except himself for inflation. Steve Rattner is a former Treasury Department official for Obama's administration and believes the Democrats are facing a bruising battle ahead. He says Joe Biden at least has one valid point, and that's the fact inflation really is a worldwide phenomenon, noting that Germany, the UK, France and of course here in Australia are all experiencing an inflation crisis. A few days ago, the president delivered an address to Americans about how his administration will tackle the crisis, a crisis of which he blamed on two things: the coronavirus pandemic and Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
I want every American to know that I'm taking inflation very seriously, and it's my top domestic priority. I want us to be crystal clear about the problem. There are two leading causes of inflation we're seeing today. The first cause of inflation is a once-in-a-century pandemic. Not only did it shut down our global economy, it threw the supply chains and demand completely out of whack, especially in countries where more effective recovery responses weren't available. And this year we have a second cause, Mr. Putin's war in Ukraine. We saw in March that 60% of inflation that month was due to price increases at the pump for gasoline. Putin's war has raised food prices as well, because Ukraine and Russia, two of the world's major breadbaskets for wheat and corn, are essentially completely stalled.
But Steve Rattner isn't having it. While those two factors have contributed to inflation, Joe Biden has been criticised all week for placing sole blame on them. Yes, the pandemic caused major disruptions to supply chain issues, and sanctions placed on Russia have contributed to an increase of gas prices. However, Steve Rattner says those are just a few of the factors, noting there is also a fair amount of self-inflicted pain to blame. This includes too much stimulus, too big budget deficits, too much bond buying by the Federal Reserve, and too much money printed by the Federal Reserve. He does believe that inflation is here to stay and that the November midterms will be a tough one for Democrats as the party fights to stay in control of the House and Senate.